Welcome. Good morning. I'm Dr. Anthony Chow, Professor and Director of San Jose State School of Information. Also serve as President-elect of both the Chinese American Librarians Association and the California Library Association. It's an honor to open today's important symposium called South Asians in LIS, part of our fourth annual celebration of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month. California is home to the largest aanhpi population in the U.S., comprising approximately 18% of the state's population and 42% of all San Jose State University students. At SJSU's iSchool, we're proud to educate 39% of all aanhpi Master of Library and Information Science candidates in the country. And this makes gatherings like today not only relevant, but vital to our collective mission of equity, inclusion, and representation. The stories and perspectives we center today reflect the deep and complex realities of what it means to be Asian in America. It's a story of resilience, of navigating invisibility and misrepresentation, and of reclaiming our voices in spaces where we have historically been marginalized. As President-elect of CALA, I know that the work to be understood and supported must continue. It's not just professional, it's deeply personal. To be seen, to be heard, and to be valued, this is the work. And through today's events like today, we ensure that the contribution of South Asians and all AANHPI professionals in librarianship are recognized and celebrated. To access the recording of today's symposium, please go to, and I'm going to put in the chat. And the recording and full transcript will be there to go to all of our community. Let me put it right there. To go to all of our 4 years of Culture and Community Symposia, please go there. So again, I want to thank all of our panelists, organizers, and the AANHPI iSchool student group for making this possible. Let us listen, uplift, and continue this important journey together. In solidarity to all, and let the conversation begin. To start, let me introduce our 3 keynote speakers for today. Samip Mallick is co-founder and executive director of South Asian American Digital Archive, SAADA. He is the second generation South Asian American who was searching for stories that reflected his identity, and he discovered that there were no institutions preserving this history. In 2008, Samip helped establish SAADA to ensure that these stories would never be lost. Under Samip's leadership, SAADA has become a nationally recognized leader in intergenerational connection and community-based storytelling. Previously, he worked for the University of Chicago and the Social Science Research Council. Samip holds degrees in computer science and LIS and has served as an advisor for the Ford Foundation and the Library of Congress. Hema Panesar is the registrar and University of Southern California Pacific Asia Museum. Hema is a cultural strategist dedicated to shaping impactful experiences that celebrate collaboration, representation, and community. As registrar of exhibitions and loans at USC Pacific Asia Museum, she brings exhibitions to life, managing everything from high-level logistics and budgets to the intricate coordination of incoming loans and production timelines. Over the last decade, Hema has contributed her expertise to leading institutions, including LACMA, the FIDM Museum, and the Kotzen Family Office, where she has played a vital role in registration, object stewardship, and exhibition planning. Hema holds an MA in Museum Studies from New York University, a BA in History from UC Berkeley, grounding her practice in both academic insight and precision. Finally, Mantra Roy, our very own community engagement librarian at the SJSU King Library. Mantra, in her role as community engagement librarian, is a tenure-track librarian faculty member at King Library. After earning her PhD in American literature and a brief college teaching career in Florida, she came to the world of libraries. She received her MLAS degree at the University of Washington, Seattle, gained critical experience at OCLC's Webb Junction, the Global Libraries Program at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and then as Humanities Librarian at University of Rochester, New York, before coming to SJSU. Facilitating access to information, research resources, and bringing visibility to community experiences that enrich and inform Silicon Valley's is part of her current work. As the PI of a I'm Less grant, $150,000 2-year program called BIPOC, Become Librarians. She has also received a research scholarship grant from ACRL to study academic librarianship in the Global South. Over the last few years, Mantra has focused on examining the diaspora of India and South Asia in Silicon Valley, starting with an oral history project that consists of Silicon Valley Speak, an oral history. And she has expanded her geographic focus on diaspora communities from 8 South Asian countries that call San Francisco Bay home. So without further ado, let's turn it over to Samip. And the title of his talk will be The Missing Stories, Introduction to South Asian America. Samip?
Thanks so much for the introduction, and I really want to express my appreciation to the organizers for putting this event together, and to my co-panelists. It's a great pleasure to meet you both, and I'm excited to hear about your work. Something that Dr. Chow said that really resonates with me is that certainly for me, this work is not just my profession or vocation, it's actually deeply personal. And so I want to share a little bit about my own story and how that intersects with the work of SAADA, the organization that I helped to start almost 17 years ago, and that I have had the good fortune to be able to work with for that time. So I'm going to share my slides and share first a little bit about SAADA as an organization. Our work is to ensure that South Asian Americans are recognized as an essential part of the American story. And I think too often, even within our own community, we're just not aware of the rich and diverse history of our own community and its story here in this country. My parents first immigrated to the United States in the late 1960s. This is a photograph of my dad. He initially arrived in 1967 in Chicago to study at the Illinois Institute of Technology. And then a few years later, he married my mom, and she returned with him to the United States in 1970. And they settled in Chicago, and that's where my dad did his graduate degree. And my mom is a commercial artist, so she worked as an artist. And eventually, my parents moved to Michigan, to suburban Detroit. My dad, he was a mechanical engineer, material scientist, and so he was drawn to the auto industry in Metro Detroit, and that's where I was born, and that's where I was, for the most part, brought up. And when I was growing up in Detroit in the 80s and 90s, there wasn't a particularly large South Asian business district in the suburban Detroit area or in Detroit. And so whenever my parents would want to buy, familiar spices or groceries or clothes or jewelry for a wedding, they would bundle me up in the car, and we would make the 4-hour drive back to Chicago, where they had first settled and arrived in the United States. And without fail, anytime as we were driving into Chicago up Lakeshore Drive, my father would point out these 2 really prominent buildings on the Chicago skyline and note for me something in particular about them. The buildings, for those who have been to Chicago, even if you don't know their names, likely you will recognize them. They're the 2 most prominent buildings on the Chicago skyline. On the left is the Sears Tower, which has more recently been renamed the Willis Tower, but I think for many of us will always be the Sears Tower. And on the right is the John Hancock Center. And the reason that he would point out these 2 buildings in particular, because these 2 really prominent, the most prominent buildings in Chicago, were only made possible because of a South Asian immigrant in the United States, someone named Fazlur Rahman Khan, who you see in this photograph here. And this is a photograph from 1971 of Fazlur Khan standing in front of then the Sears Tower under construction. Now, all Chicagoans know about these 2 buildings. Most Americans do, or they at least have seen them or might recognize them. But very few people know about the story of Fazlur Rahman Khan. And for me, his story is so emblematic of the story of so many other communities, stories from our community, the South Asian American community, as well as other communities, immigrant communities, and other marginalized communities that are often not reflected or seen as a central part of the American story. Now, as a young person, I would frankly not be very interested in this story that my dad would tell me again and again, but it's obviously stayed with me. And I think at SAADA, our work really has been to ensure that these stories are not hidden, that we all know about these stories within our community and outside of it. And so that's the work that we've been doing for the last 17 years. Our work at SAADA is to document those communities here in the US who trace their heritage to India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, Maldives, and the many South Asian diaspora communities around the world. And by that, we include those who've come here directly from, Trinidad or Guyana, or the UK, Australia, Kenya, South Africa, and other parts of the world, who sometimes through 2 or 3 or even more generations back trace their heritage to South Asia, but who are here in the United States today. According to the latest census data, there are now more than 6 million people all across the United States who trace their heritage to South Asia. In fact, our community is the fastest growing immigrant community in the country. And if you do the math, you see that 1 in every 55 Americans traces their heritage to South Asia. And yet, as we all know, the history of our community is not represented in dominant institutions and museums, in most archives, and it's really been up to us as a community to ensure that our stories are reflected in the American story. I want to share a quote with you from a scholar of archival studies who talks about what impact it has on communities to not have access to their own histories, to not know their own stories. A scholar named Jeanette Bastien. And here's what she says. She says, a community without its records is a community under siege, defending itself and its identity and its version of history without a firm foundation on which to stand. And that certainly was the case for the South Asian American community when we started SAADA. There were no other institutions working systematically to collect and preserve stories from our community. And our fear was not only that our community stories weren't being heard, but that they were in danger of being lost entirely. South Asians began immigrating to the United States in larger numbers beginning in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And those who were coming at that time were coming from a very different South Asia than the one that we think of today. Of course, as likely all of us know, until 1947, what we today think of as the modern-day nation-state of India and Pakistan and Bangladesh were all under British colonial rule, as was Sri Lanka until 1948 and the Maldives until 1965. And so the South Asia that these early immigrants were leaving behind was once again very different than the one we think of today. It was predominantly immigrants from the Punjab region of British India who were the majority of the early immigrants from South Asia, and for the most part, Punjabi Sikh men. And when they came to the United States, primarily they were settling on the West Coast in California, but also in Oregon and Washington State, as well as the western parts of Canada. And for the most part, working as laborers in farms and fields, lumber yards, mills, etc. There were smaller numbers of individuals who were able to come in other ways and for other reasons. This, for example, is a photograph from 1914 of members of the Illinois chapter of the Hindustan Association of America. This was an organization that would help acclimate students to life here in the United States who had come here from South Asia. There were, however, very few South Asian women and families able to come to the United States in these early days because of restrictive immigration policies. This is an example of one South Asian woman and family that came here, Kala Bagai, who arrived with her husband, Vaishnadas Bagai, and their 3 young sons in 1915. And this article is fascinating because it claims that Kala Bagai was the first South Asian woman to set foot in San Francisco in more than a decade. But the realities that these early immigrants faced was one of xenophobia and hostility and racism. This is an article from 1906 that gives you a sense of what these immigrants were facing. As you can see, it's titled Our First Invasion by Hindus and Mohammedans. And just a quick note on the terminology that's being used here. In this case, the term Hindu is not being used as a religious term, as we might think of it today, but as a racial term, describing anyone here with brown skin who was here from South Asia. And it was predominantly, as I mentioned, Punjabi Sikh men, often with turbans and beards, who were the recipients of this early xenophobia and racism. This is another article from 1907 that was published in Bellingham, Washington, a small lumber town a few hours outside of Seattle, titled Have We a Dusky Peril? Hindu Hordes Invading the State. And just a few months after this article was published, in Bellingham, a town where a group of Punjabi men had settled and were working in the lumber industry, one night a group of white men got together and, in an act of mob violence, chased out of the city every Punjabi laborer who had settled and was working there. And this was kind of the sentiment that people were encountering and facing. And in fact, there was other acts of violence all across the places where South Asians were settling. This xenophobia was also reflected in the halls of Congress. So in 1917, the US Congress passed the 1917 Immigration Act, which effectively drew a line around South Asia and parts of Southeast Asia, the sections you see in red in this map, and barred immigration from those parts of the world to the United States. And this all kind of culminated in 1923 with the Supreme Court decision, United States v. Bhagat Singh Thind, where it was decided unanimously by the Supreme Court that South Asians should be barred from becoming American citizens because we're not white. As you can see, the article is titled "Hindus Too Brunette to Vote Here," and there's a photograph of a South Asian man with a caption that simply reads, quote unquote, "the problem." And that was effectively the law of this land for the next quarter century and more. So it was only in 1946, after years of campaigning, that South Asians were allowed to become American citizens once more. And only in 1965, a couple of years before my parents arrived here, with the passage of the Immigration Nationality Act of 1965, that larger numbers of South Asians and immigrants from other parts of the world were able to come to the US for the very first time in larger numbers. So I want to shift now and share a couple of stories with you from the archive. And through these stories, give you a sense both of the richness and diversity of South Asian American experiences, but also how it is that we go about doing the work that we do at SAADA. And the first story that I'll share with you is that of Dalip Singh Sand. So Dalip Sand arrived in the United States in 1920. He actually first came to study at the University of California, Berkeley, initially thinking that he would study agriculture and fruit canning so he could go back to India and support his family and their business. But soon after arriving, he realized that his true love was mathematics, what he had studied in his undergraduate degree. And so he changed his major, and in 1924, 4 years after arriving, he graduated having completed both a master's and PhD. But Sand graduated just 1 year after the Supreme Court decision, United States v. Bhagat Singh Thind, which barred South Asians from becoming American citizens. And it meant, of course, as a result, he could not become a US citizen. There was also alien land laws and other anti-immigrant legislation in place in California and elsewhere that prevented him from owning land or even marrying outside of his race. And so he's left with very few options. So he moved to Southern California and he began working as a farmer. And he did lettuce farming and other kinds of farming for the next 20 plus years, but all the while continuing to be interested in politics and world affairs. Finally, in the late 1940s, after South Asians were able to become American citizens, he decided that he would become a US citizen, but that he wouldn't stop there. He was going to run for judge in the small town where he lived. He was elected, much to his surprise, he later shared. And then a few years later, though, he decided he wouldn't even stop there. He was going to run for Congress. And so in 1956, less than a decade after becoming a US citizen, Sand became the first Asian American elected to national office in this country. In 2008, soon after we started SAADA, I actually had the opportunity to meet with Congressman Sand's grandson, who's sitting on his lap in this photograph. And what he shared with me was that he had 5 large military-grade trunks full of his grandfather's materials sitting in his home in the Bay Area, but that he had never been approached by any of their archives or museums interested in taking these materials in. And as I was talking with him, what really hit home to me was about how close we were to losing such an incredibly important story, not just a South Asian American story, but an American story that all of us should know, and about how many other stories there are like it, waiting to be heard and in danger of being lost. So that's the work that SAADA has been doing for the last 17 years. I want to share about a few other initiatives that we have that preserve the stories of our communities today. And one example is SAADA's Archival Creators Fellowship Program, which has to date supported 24 fellows in preserving stories from groups that have been historically marginalized within the South Asian American community. Fellows collect oral history interviews, they collect archival materials, and they also work with an artist to create a new exhibit on the SAADA website sharing their community stories. And I'll share just a few examples of those with you now. Here's one, but created by Michael Henry, whose project focused on Indo-Jamaican experiences in the United States. Another by Mustafa Saifuddin, whose project was called An Archive of Queer Brown Feelings, and which focused on South Asian queer and trans experiences and stories. And this is a project by about Dalit stories and identities by Dhani Adanki called An Altar to Dalit Honor, And I want to play for you a short clip from one of her interviewees talking about Dalit identity and what it's meant to her.
Liberation lies only when they touch you. When you make Dalit bodies as so powerful and strong that there is no liberation without the Dalit touch. That's the kind of affirmation that we need to arrive at.
Next is a project by Luna Ranjit about Nepali experiences in the United States. And I'll play similarly a short clip of one of her interviewees.
To feel foreign in this country for me is like absolute, because I'm an immigrant. But that feeling of foreignness was also there in Nepal because I am of an indigenous community. If you put like a Nepali person on a picture, like I don't look the look, and I've always been like told like I look foreign, like what's the word? Foreignness, but in like different atmosphere is very interesting.
And finally, a project by Ifadul Haq focused on the experiences of Bangladeshi queer migrants in the United States. And the clip is actually from Ifadul talking about his project. Here's what he says.
Moving Memories is a virtual exhibit showcasing oral histories of Bangladeshi queer migrants in the US. All of us involved in this project understand that archiving is colonial business, but archiving is also a site of power struggle to tell our own histories. This archival collection is a product of deep trust, care, and queer love.
Another project in which we collect and share stories of the lived experiences of South Asian immigrants is through our First Days project, which is about people's very first experiences in the country. What was it like on the first day that they arrived in the United States? We've now collected more than 800 stories in this project, and I'll similarly just play one short clip for you from one of the interviewees talking about her experience in the United States.
As you reflect kind of on your time and just kind of what are some of the memories that you shared, is there anything that you anything that particularly strikes you or makes you smile or laugh or cry when you think about that time?
So it was not like I came in 71 November and I became pregnant by 71 December or something like that. And we didn't have car. And this memory I'll never forget. And I was already past 3 weeks overdue. So my doctor was calling me every day. And I had to take a public transportation. So I will take a bus to go to his office. But one day it was almost like, I was almost about a week and a half and I was waiting for the bus and bus wouldn't show up and baby was pushing. So I decided to hitch a hike. I said, I'm going to hitchhike. With this big belly, nobody's going to do anything to me. And so I hitchhiked and somebody stopped and I jumped in his car and he said, where would you like to go? And I said, I'm going to a doctor's place. And within a block, he said, honey, can we have dinner tonight? And I got so scared. So instead of waiting till he reaches the doctor's point, I said, oh, the train station came. So I said, okay, drop me here. I need to take a train. And I got off. And then I ended up walking 1.5 miles. So when I reached my doctor, he was so amazed that I had walked 1.5 miles with so much pressure and everything. So he said, here. I still remember the doctor. He was an Egyptian doctor. He said, here, I'm giving you money for the cab. On your way home, you're taking the cab. And I'll never forget that incident ever for my life. No.
The last story from the archive that I want to share is a story that actually took place less than a mile from where I'm sitting today in Philadelphia, of someone named Anandibai Joshi. So Anandibai Joshi was born in 1865 in Pune in Western colonial India. And she was known for being a very boisterous young girl. In fact, she had earned the nickname Mala, which means wrestler, after defeating a male cousin in a wrestling match. But at just the age of 9, it was decided by her parents that it was time for her to be married. And she was married off to someone nearly 20 years her senior. At 13, she became pregnant and gave birth to her first child, a son. But within just a few days, her son died. And she believed very strongly that the reason that she lost her son was because she did not have access to the medical care that she needed as a young woman in India, because there were no women doctors in India at that time. No South Asian woman had been able to become a doctor. And so Anandibai Joshi resolved that she would become the first. In order to do that, she actually came here to Philadelphia in 1883. And she wrote a letter asking for admission at the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania, one of the very few places in the world where a woman could become a medical doctor at that time. And here's what she wrote. That determination which has brought me to your country, against the combined opposition of my friends and caste, ought to go a long way towards helping me to carry out the purpose for which I came. I surrender to my poor suffering countrywomen the true medical aid they so sadly stand in need of, and which they'd rather die for than accept at the hands of a male physician. The voice of humanity is with me, and I must not fail. My soul is moved to help the many who cannot help themselves. And so she was admitted, and in 1886, she graduated from the Women's Medical College, becoming the first South Asian woman to earn a medical degree in the entire world. This is her on the left, along with two other international students at the Women's Medical College, one from Japan and the other from Syria. Anandibai Joshi's story is one of the stories that we share on Revolution Remix, which is our walking tour of Philadelphia that highlights the stories of South Asians in Philadelphia from the 1700s all the way up to the present day. And I want to end with a song that was composed by Anju, a talented young singer-songwriter. We actually worked with 5 South Asian American musicians to create a soundtrack to the walking tour. So now as you go on the tour, you also get to listen to this music. And the song that Anju composed is about Anandibai Joshi's story. And so I'll play just a little bit of it for you now for the sake of time, but you can listen to this full song on Spotify or on our website, which is saada.org. I'll play just a tiny bit now. So, in 2021, we published a book called Our Stories: An Introduction to South Asian America, recognizing that these stories were not accessible, especially to high school and college age readers. And so this book is an introduction to South Asian American history. It includes contributions from 64 authors, scholars, journalists, artists, community members. And if anyone's interested and you don't have the book yet, please send me a direct message in the Zoom chat, and I'll be happy to send you a personal discount code for the book. Please do continue to stay engaged with our work. You can visit our website at saada.org, SAADA.org, and you can sign up for our weekly newsletter at saada.org/subscribe. Thank you so much, and looking forward to hearing from the other panelists.
Thank you so much. That was pretty amazing, Samip. Let's give Samip a loud Zoom applause for. We appreciate you sharing all of that information. The next speaker will be Hema Panesar, and she will be, the title of her remarks will be Telling the Hard Stories Representing South Asian Memories. Hema?
Thank you for that introduction. Thank you, Samip. That was really wonderful. I loved all the stories you shared. And thank you to San Jose State University for inviting me to speak with you all. I'm very happy to be here. I'm going to go ahead and share my slides. So my talk is called Telling the Hard Stories Representing South Asian Memories. I'm going to do an exploration of collections and exhibitions that we've done at USC Pacific Asia Museum, also known as PAM, moving forward. And I'm going to give you a little bit of context about what I do as an exhibitions registrar and a little bit about PAM. So PAM is a small institution based in Pasadena, California. It was acquired by USC in 2013. And it's one of the few institutions in the US that is dedicated to celebrating the arts and culture of Asia and the Pacific Islands. So as a registrar, I have a combination of work that I do. It's collections management and exhibitions logistics. So on the collection side, I work on collections inventory, contribute to the database, and also handle the objects with care. And on the exhibition side, I handle all of the pre-planning all the way to the installation and to the opening of an exhibition, and then take down the exhibition and start the whole cycle all over again. So the first thing I want to ask you all, and just what does it mean to remember through objects? Like what does that mean to you? I mean, you just sit with that and think about it. And so I want to go through our like an overview of our South Asian collection at PAM. And here's a little bit about the mission of Pacific Asia Museum. And so PAM has a collection of about 16,000 objects. So we've been collecting since the 60s. And about 3% of that is actually from South Asia. And regions of that include India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Burma, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and Bhutan. And we have a variety of collections ranging from textiles, sculptures, decorative arts, prints, and paintings. Our strongest point is actually probably our textiles. And here we are. Here's some samples of textiles from Afghanistan and Bhutan. Now, when we focus on museum collections, one of the most important things to understand is provenance. And provenance is the history of an object. So those are questions you can ask of what do we know about this object? Where does it come from? How did donors or collectors come into possession of these objects? And how did these objects end up in the museum? What stories do they tell? However, one of the difficult parts about collecting institutions is that provenance can be vague in terms of where things come from and how donors have them in their possession. Like we would receive basic gift receipts from donors and collectors with very little information. So that becomes a problem. And especially given in museum culture now, there's a very heavy focus on repatriation. And that's where this information is crucial. So how can we address that and ensure that we are preserving this information, preserving the memories of these objects? So curators, researchers, and scholars, they are crucial to helping us solve these mysteries. And I want to show you, for example, like these are fragments supposedly from India and Pakistan. These are, anytime you see a fragment like this, take it with a pinch of salt. Like you never know exactly where it comes from. We don't know how it was brought here all the way to, America. And it's always important to question these. So our curator had actually conducted a textile survey of textiles from India. So on this piece here, she was able to identify this was a salwar kameez from Rajasthan in India. And because she can recognize the material, she is able to date it, but give it a rough date of early 1900. And, she has the expertise to identify the region. And by having this information, we're able to document it for future generations, and we're uncovering these memories for objects. Another route we can do to work on provenance is actually to focus on acquiring contemporary works from community artists. This is a great opportunity to engage with living artists who are here for the representation. We want to give them the space for that. And we know we have a clear direct line to the provenance of their artwork. We know where it's made, how they made it, we know when it was made, and that is why there is a growing effort at PAM to collect more contemporary works. And I also do want to mention that there is a growing effort in the US overall of provenance research. There's a lot more positions opening up there, especially places like the Met, because it's just so important to understand where these pieces come from. The other way that we care about like the memories for objects is through collections care and stewardship. So we focus a lot on collections care, which is handling all of the objects in storage. So we also run into some problems there as well. This is very common for museums, is that storage is overpacked. And as you can see on this photo on the left, this is what some of our storage looks like. A lot of textiles are in those boxes. They're overpacked. In the photo in the middle, it's a very large piece and it's been folded multiple times. So this can cause active damage, actually, when part of our stewardship is to prevent that or mitigate existing damage. So a growing effort as well is to move collections to offsite facilities. We use Crozier and we rehouse everything because we want to make sure that these pieces live on, beyond us, and we don't want to cause any more damage to them. And in addition to that, documentation is also very, very important. So this piece on the right, I could tell you a little story while we were doing our textile survey. This piece was described as a Hindu embroidered shawl in our database. And you may ask, what does that mean? And the answer is no one knew. No one knew what that meant. But that was the description we received when we received the piece. So our curator was able to identify it as a pulkari, which is known for these geometric patterns. And when we document it, we take out that original description, we put in the curator's description of what it is. So now we are preserving the actual memory of this object, of what it is, and how future generations can understand it. Our database is linked to our website, so you can search the online collection, and we want to make sure that information is accurate for our audience. Now, moving on, I want to highlight an exhibition that we had in 2024. It was called Searching for Home by Hema Abid. Hema Abid, she is a Pakistani artist, but she is based in Seattle now, and she has been trained in Mughal-style miniature paintings, but what she is known for is her wood carving. So these pieces here, everything is made out of wood. There she is there, and she is known for carving like very intricate details in her wood, and she takes everyday objects. She focuses on, this exhibition in particular focuses on the global refugee crisis, particularly the struggles of women and children. And she takes there's real life stories and everyday objects to create this like very haunting space. So when visitors first come into the exhibition, they are confronted with this barbed wire piece, which is, again, all carved out of wood. She is an incredibly impressive human being. She's also a humanitarian. I love her. And so visitors are confronted by this, and then they are able to walk through the exhibition and go through pieces she has carved out of wood of everyday objects, and to serve or preserve the memory of displacement, trauma, and resilience of these refugees. Here are some examples of her work. She made a bunch of pacifiers. These are tiffins. This was in reference to a shooting that happened in Pakistan. We have the bloody breast pump to show the struggles that women face when they have small children. We have the bloody underwear on the barbed wire. And on the bricks photo, there's shoes, toys, cell phones. A lot of the items she actually used her parents' belongings to create these replicas. So it's very personal, it's very detailed. And it's a story that she wants to give to people. She wants to give a voice to the voiceless and make sure that their stories and their memories live on. Also, a common motif that she has throughout this exhibition are the ants. These are ants that she has made out of epoxy as well. And they represent their need for survival and their need for sustenance, and the fact that they are still resilient through all of this trauma. And that leads us to these stories and to these memories. And this was probably the most haunting part, was just images of children and women against a wall with bullet holes. You know, this is what survives. So overall, this exhibition was incredibly impactful. And as part of the show, we wanted to have an interactive piece where visitors were able to write postcards in response to a prompt, "What is home to you?" Because the show was about displacement, we wanted to focus, what is home? And I just want to point out all these envelopes are also made out of wood. Just incredible how she creates those folds on those. And so for the postcard section, I was personally responsible for mailing them out, and they were just so beautiful and incredible on what people were writing. You know, people were writing to their loved ones, or even just writing to people who have passed away. They just wanted to send a message out, and they wanted to reconnect with people. They were friends sharing their experience of the exhibition with each other, and that creates even more memories of the show, of the space, and for these people. So overall, it is one of Pam's goals to keep working with contemporary artists. Like, we want to engage in their stories, and we want to give them the space where people can be seen and heard. This is how we represent, and this is how we preserve memories, whether through objects or exhibitions. This piece here with the little boy on the swing was one of the postcards that we had. Hema wanted to demonstrate that, you know, like there's like a dragon back here, but a little child can, you know, still have a world of fantasy despite of what's going on. So it's also it's also important to remember these memories as well. And final thoughts on this, it's through both collections and exhibitions, museums are responsible for representation by preserving memory, uncovering both the beauty and the hard stories that they tell. And I just want to say thank you again for letting me tell my story here as well, and having the opportunity to speak with you all. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to hearing Mantra's story next.
Way to go. Thank you, Hema. Appreciate it very much. All right, next is Mantra. So Mantra will be talking about privileged but underrepresented, creating space for South Asian voices in Silicon Valley. Mantra, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the iSchool to actually give us, I think, all of us this platform to share what our experiences have been with South Asian stories. And it was great listening to Samip and Hema, your work. And I'm a great admirer because I'm quite new in this area of work, like trying to curate these stories in Silicon Valley of the South Asian experience. So I will start with how I got into the South Asians in Silicon Valley initiative. So what happened was I came to the Bay Area in 2019. It's my first year of tenure track librarianship at San Jose State's King Library. And I used to visit earlier because I have family here, but then living here, I noticed there are huge concentration of people from India and then widely South Asia in just one kind of well-defined geographic space. right? So, and then as I started observing this, I realized that, but where are these stories? Where are these stories of all the South Asians, the Indians, over the years from the 1950s, 60s, and from the 60s, especially after 65, the concentration has, of course, gone up, as Samip also mentioned in his presentation. So I started talking to a lot of community members, and I realized that, this needs to be curated, this needs to be preserved and recorded. So I started with the idea of an oral history project, and I will share my screen. So this was my first project. I started with Desis of Silicon Valley Speak an Oral History. And, the word Desis, of course, as I was researching, is also kind of contested, because I think at some point it was considered to represent all of South Asians. But then I realized that it's primarily well understood as defining people from India mostly, and then from Pakistan and Bangladesh a little bit. But for example, Nepal, for example, Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, Bhutan, Maldives, they will not associate with the word Desis at all. So in this particular project, I started with looking at Asian Indians in Silicon Valley and what their experiences and stories have been. So, I started talking to people, I collected a lot of oral histories, and now I'm beginning to write. I'm going to submit a journal article about the experience of collecting these stories. And I met people from various sectors about, who are from India. But then, like these are some of the recordings that I have collected. They represent different sectors, but mostly, as many of us know, this is mostly, because of the tech sector and the predominance of Indians and in the tech sector. A lot of them came from the tech sector backgrounds, but they're in theater, they do, art, they're cinema artists, like all these different fields were also represented. So, but what happened was, as I was conducting these oral histories, what I realized was, depending on the age group and the region that they came from in India, many of them were talking about their relationship or the familiar relationship with Pakistan or with Bangladesh, right? Or being closer to the foothills of the Himalayas, depending on the region. So they have similarities or close cultural links with Nepal. Or if they were coming from southern India, they were talking about Sri Lanka and what that has meant historically to them, culturally to them. So then I realized that, there has to be an expanded understanding of not only Asian Indian, but the South Asian experience in particular in Silicon Valley. And that's when I started looking at the other project and, started laying the groundwork for South Asians in Silicon Valley. So I'm going to share the screen of the South Asians in Silicon Valley project now. Okay, so can you see my screen? Yes, okay. So this is the South Asians in Silicon Valley project. This started in 2024, so it's very new. And what I'm trying to do is recording, preserving, and sharing the South Asian experiences and legacies of the Bay Area of Silicon Valley. So how I'm organizing this is I'm doing permanent digital exhibits on different subject matter, and then doing a physical in-person time, like a month or a 2 long exhibit inside the library space. And then I build a community event around that particular exhibit. So, community members are invited in, and this is one of the first times on our campus that the South Asian community in the Bay Area in general and San Jose State community, like faculty, students, and staff, can come together focused on and discussing about that particular sector that I am working or that I am showcasing in that particular exhibit. So, for example, we have had different exhibits. So the first one was South Asians in Silicon Valley, which looked at different aspects of the South Asian lived experience in the Bay Area. So we focused on activism, on the game of cricket, on religion, because 5 major world religions are represented in the South Asian community, and they're very actively practiced in the Bay Area. And then, of course, food. And then, we brought all these experiences. We traveled across most of the Bay Area trying to pick up materials, artifacts, talking to people who have led active lives or who lead active lives. Because I think collecting and preserving and then showcasing, sharing the actual lived experiences, not just academic study of the community, but the actual experience here is very important. And then we do relevant events around it, and I'll come to that later. So our next exhibit was Sounds of South Asia, where we focused on the music scene as cultivated in the Bay Area by all South Asian communities. So in our digital exhibit, we focused on photographs and of various musical instruments. And how we did this was, so if we say clicked on the bansuri from Nepal, we had, we have timed like brief recordings of what this instrument actually sounds like. So this is a digital exhibit that's accessible for all times. But in the physical exhibit that was up for 2 months, what we did was we had photographs, because some of these instruments can be very expensive and rare, so we didn't want to bring them and showcase them in a gallery space that is actually open to the public in our library. So there could be security issues with a lot of these instruments. So what we did was we put up photographs of all these instruments that we wanted to showcase, and we had QR codes attached to all the photographs so that visitors could scan and actually listen to the sound of the instruments. And our current exhibit that actually went live on 30th April is about South Asian students on SJSU campus, the earliest records. So we started in the 1930s and we went on to 1990, because post, in the late 80s and 1990 particularly, and when the H-1B visa also started getting revised, right? So we see a huge influx of students from the 1990s. So I wanted to do a historical archival exhibit on the earliest presence of students, and that digital exhibit is still being built, but I can show you actually some of the photos that we actually found in our archives. So this student, Mary Leela Rao, she was the homecoming queen on SJSU campus in 1961. And she was the first woman of color on our campus to become homecoming queen in 1961. And in 1968, we have the first record of a Black student becoming homecoming queen. So that's how we know that she was the first woman of color on our campus. And she was an Olympic athlete, too, before she came to SJSU. So in 1956, Melbourne Olympics was where she had actually competed. And then later when she came to our campus, she did remarkable stuff. And she was very popular. And we have photos of her coronation ball, for example, where I personally, coming from India, I was very, very impressed with how she wore her sari in Pride in 1960, 1961, when saris were not very commonly recognized, as a profession. But I felt very proud of what she was doing. And then, of course, as we went back to our archival records, and that's a family, Samip also mentioned, the Bagai family, right? So that's a very well-known family in the Bay Area, and also for South Asian America, I think. And Ram Bagai, the son on the right, actually came to San Jose State for 2 years to study. So we have his diploma record and his commencement record. And his daughter, Rani Bagai, is actually going to visit our campus in early June to talk to us about her father's experience on San Jose State campus and the San Jose area in general. So we are very excited about this. And on May 30th is when our digital exhibit will go live. So we are finishing up that work. Now, to go back to our actual projects, if in the South Asians in Silicon Valley. So coming up is the community event, which we'll be doing with Rani Bagai, his daughter. But in the Sounds of South Asia event, for example, we had musicians from the community, right? So we had somebody representing Kashmir. We had people from Nepal. We had students from, the Nepal student was a high schooler. So she plays the sarangi from Nepal. So she represented that. We had Nepali folk music. We had Sri Lankan music. We had Afghan, a small boy playing the tabla from Afghanistan. So it was beautiful, and the whole community came together to celebrate this music. So in an academic institution, we were trying to bring community and campus together by showcasing what really enriches our San Jose area. And then in the very first exhibit, which was about the South Asians and different aspects of the community, we did this exhibit, and we had, again, community members come and participate. So kids, K-12 kids, some performed music, some recited poetry in Tamil, in Sinhala, in Telugu, in Sanskrit, and we had Bengali music. So we tried to represent as many people, cultivating these cultures in our community. So and our upcoming projects include, so we are going to focus on community journalism in the fall semester, and then we're going to do South Asian theater in the spring semester, and we will culminate with a Tagore's play production where community thespians and San Jose State theater students and faculty will come together to perform a Tagore in one of our theaters. So I'm very excited about this work that we have just started doing, and because we have a huge population in the area, like at least 20% of Santa Clara County, around the San Jose City area is South Asian, identifies as South Asian, and even in the Bay Area largely, which includes 7 counties, we have a huge concentration of the population. So while many schools focus on academic study of South Asia, so they have South Asian study programs. In the Bay Area, we do not have an institution or an institutional record of the lived experiences of South Asians, and that's what we are trying to do at the King Library. So, thank you.
Thank you much. And we really appreciate all your work at the King Library. San Jose State, as I mentioned earlier, is close to 40% ANHPI. So thank you so much for that representation. Okay, so next we are going to head to a panel discussion, and I'm delighted to introduce Taranat Chahal, and I apologize if I mispronounce your name. I'm the proud founder of the AANHPI student group here at San Jose State School of Information, and Taranat is the vice chair, I believe, and will be leading the panel discussion. So,
hi everyone. My name is Taryn Jaw, and as Anthony said, I am the graduate student in informatics, and I serve as the vice chair of the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander group. I just want to start off by thanking you guys for sharing your incredible work. It was really interesting to listen to everything that you guys do. As a South Asian myself, I deeply understand the value and the impact of everything that you guys are doing. So I just want to say that I'm really proud to see representation in the field itself. So with that being said, I have some questions. And just to keep our conversation flowing smoothly, we'll just start off with Samip and then go in the order that you all presented. But if you do feel like something resonates with you, feel free to jump in whenever you guys like. So the first question I have is, what advice would you give to South Asian students or early career professionals that are entering the field?
Thank you. Really good to meet you and excited to be part of this conversation as well. So in terms of advice, I think the advice that I'll share is advice that I would give myself if I were to start in the field again, which is essentially recognizing what your learning style is and really trying to pursue opportunities that allow you to enhance the way that you personally learn. So for me, I'm very much an experiential learner. I really benefit from being able to do things hands-on or have experiences. And so for me, what really was valuable was that we had already started SAADA before I pursued my MLIS degree. And so I really ended up using SAADA as kind of my project for every single class I took in my degree, which was great because then it felt to me at least like, okay, I'm really able to apply the learning that I'm having theoretically in the classroom to something that I really care deeply about. So while it's not, of course, necessary that everyone start an organization before they do an MLS, I think the recommendation or the guidance that I would provide would be to have something, of course, that you care about passionately and find ways to incorporate that into your actual academic work. One way is, of course, to volunteer in an organization or with a library or archives museum that that you're really passionate about and where you can then apply the learning that you're having in the classroom to that. So yeah, that would be my guidance.
Hi,
Hi, nice to meet you, Taranjot. Um, the advice I would give is just be kind to everybody that you meet in your field and be professional. I mean, that takes you very far in your career, whatever it is you choose to do, because you're already passionate. Like, a lot of people here are graduate students. You're passionate about this work. You want to pursue this. So I just believe, yeah, just keep it professional and never be afraid to ask questions, especially if you don't understand something. Just go for it. Ask questions, take those opportunities. And, I just want to let you all know I'm happy to be a resource for everyone here. So if anyone ever has questions, reach out to me and I'm happy to be there because that's something I wish I had early on in my career, just like a bit of a mentor. So, I always want to offer that up for everyone. Yeah.
Sure. Hi, Taranjot. Nice to meet you. Well, I'll just add to what both of them have mentioned, but I'm that yes, look for opportunities to connect with people. Sometimes, you can talk to faculty members, librarians, other community project leaders, who are doing interesting work in the area that you're interested in. Sometimes they will have projects and you can just experiential learning, right? Get hands-on, volunteering is a great way to learn new things. The other thing I would always also say is, as you go to different cultural institutions, right, cultural memory institutions, you go to a museum, you go to some place or even a library, right, a local library in a new city that you're visiting. I mean, that's how I also started thinking of many of my projects is how is South Asia represented, if at all, here? Is there any representation at all? So I started asking those questions, like when I visit museums, and I try to visit museums, whichever city I visit, and I always look for those. And usually a lot of our cities, like Samip's work says, the South Asian America is widely spread across the country. So there is presence everywhere. So is South Asia at all represented here? And if not, why not? Or if it is represented, how is it represented? Right? So those critical questions, I think, can develop a lot of interest in one, and then you can start looking for opportunities to work with others.
I just wanted to go back on something that Hema mentioned. I loved all of your guys' responses, but mentioning that you wish you had a mentor. And I feel like growing up like Punjabi myself, my mom's a nurse, so I didn't have anyone that's going in a similar field. So I feel like it's really important to reach out and ask questions and just get involved to know, because I don't have a mentor myself. So I think that was something I really liked that you mentioned. So the next question that I have for all of you is that, have you ever had a moment where you were working and you thought this is why I'm doing this? And if you can tell us just a little bit about it.
Yeah, so I'm fortunate to have many such moments. Over the past 17 years with SAADA, we've been able to really connect with so many members of our community, and there's so many people who have been part of the work as an organization. So yeah, just very fortunate to almost every day get to hear from community members who are really want to be part of the work or touched by the work. But I think I had a moment much more personally recently that really, for me, felt like a moment of this is why I'm doing this, which is when I started SAADA, I was 24, 25 years old, and I'm definitely not anymore. So, but when we first started the organization, I felt like I was doing the work for myself a lot. Hear the stories that I didn't hear growing up, and hear the resources that I didn't have growing up. And so I'm going to try to create those resources so that young people growing up today have those resources. They're looking for them, that they can find the stories that I couldn't find, that I really craved and that I felt like would change my sense of myself and my understanding of my place in the American story. And so I have a daughter now who's 9 years old, and SAADA's work is not necessarily specifically targeted at younger children, but really high school age and above. And so we published the book, Our Stories, which I mentioned. And that book is in, 4,000 schools and libraries and homes across the country, including in my home. And it's always been on my daughter's bookshelf since she was very young. And I've always thought, oh, is this amazing? This book will be there waiting for her when she gets to high school. It's ready for her. And that's always been really meaningful for me. But more recently, she's in 3rd grade now, and she was assigned to do a Women's History Day project. And she had to identify a woman and, kind of do a project researching that woman. And then either she had a variety of options. She could do a presentation, or she could dress up like that person, different ways that she could approach the project. And so when she came home to tell me about it, her initial idea was that she would do a project about Taylor Swift, which was also like the idea of a lot of, I think, the other kids in the classroom. But then I said, like, well, what do you think about looking in the book and seeing if there's a story in there that you might be interested in? And so the project that she ended up doing was about Aanhpi Joshi, the first South Asian woman who became a medical doctor in Philadelphia in 1883. And it was really fun, to know that the resources that SAADA is creating actually literally was now available to her and that she was getting to use them. And she did her project. And earlier this week, actually, she went and presented in front of her class. She dressed up like Aanhpi. She told everyone the story of Aanhpi. And it was really, really personally special for me. And obviously it's a microcosm, but that's my hope, is that those kinds of resources that SAADA is creating are available to young people everywhere across the country, and that there will be many more Women's History Day projects or book reports about South Asian history, South Asian American history. Like I said, once again, like as a young person, I would have craved that so much. It would have meant so much to me, and the resources didn't exist to make that possible. So now they do.
Yeah, I kind of want to add on to that. It's like, the connections you make in this field. It's like I said, everyone is passionate in this field, and that's what makes it so exciting. Everyone gets excited, and I have to say, this symposium is I'm so glad I do what I do. I get to meet all of you. I get to talk about what I love. And, one of my favorite parts is definitely when I get to go into storage and look at the collections, hold them in my hands, and look at all the details. And it's like, wow, like I'm incredibly privileged to do this. And for exhibitions, I also feel very privileged because, these are stories we get to tell for artists and curators, and I get to be a part of the production of that. And I just always find that really meaningful. And then when the exhibition opens, you see all your hard work come to fruition, and it's always rewarding to see that.
Yeah, it is rewarding to see when, when younger kids, like Samip was also mentioning. So I remember during the first exhibit when I was installing it on the 5th floor of the King Library, and I was we were finishing up the works. I was still working with title cards and with the artifacts, arranging them and things. And then a group of high school kids came to visit the King Library, because the King Library is a joint academic and public library, so it's accessible to the public. So a teacher had brought her kids to the, and they were said that this exhibit is going up, so if you want to go, so they came to the 5th floor. And while I was arranging that, and because this is San Jose area, right, so it's a huge concentration of South Asians in the school district as well. In spite of that, we are not represented well. So there were 2 kids, in this group of kids, when they were looking at the exhibit cases while I was working through them, and 2 kids, I heard them say, "That's me. I see this in my home." And that was really my moment. I said, yes, this is why I'm doing this, because in spite of the number, or huge numbers, they do not see themselves represented in these public spaces where others are also present. And I could see their friends were also paying attention to what these kids, and they started describing the objects in that exhibit case. And I was standing and watching. I said, this is why I'm doing this. It's really so important for that kind of visibility and representation.
Yeah, I really agree that it's important for representation, especially as South Asians. And like Samip mentioned, when you're younger and you don't see that representation, it's kind of you feel a little bit left out in a way, especially in I can go back to history classes in high school. We'd learn about everything. We'd have a small section for South Asian history, and then we'd move on to a chunk for a month of other history. So I really feel it's really important, and for younger generations too, to see what the history is of many other South Asian cultures, right? So the next question I have is if you've ever encountered any stereotype or assumptions about South Asians in these spaces, and how have you kind of pushed back on them?
Yeah, for me, I for the last 17 years with SAADA, but then full time for the last 13 years, I've been working at a South Asian American archival organization. So the people, I work predominantly with South Asian Americans or South Asian community members, other Asian American community members. So it's hard for me to talk about like stereotypes or assumptions per se. It's just not my day-to-day reality. But I will say that, I think it's also worth recognizing that there are relatively few South Asian Americans in these spaces to begin with. And I think that's when, as with today's panel, like when there's an opportunity for us to connect, it's been really meaningful and powerful for me. And so, we a few years ago created an entity called the SAADA Archivist Collective, where we brought together like South Asian American archivists and memory workers, and all worked on projects related to South Asian American history and our community stories. And we have like an annual volunteer cohort that takes place in the summer. So those spaces for me have been really meaningful, because one thing that I've maybe if I could speak to a stereotype or assumption is that our community doesn't care about these histories, is something that I think we often tell ourselves. But through SAADA's work, have found that to be completely untrue, that we deeply care about our own history and representation. And maybe, as Mantra was saying, like we don't see that representation, and so often don't know where to get started or how to even begin that process. But there's so many people who have connected to SAADA's work, engaged with SAADA's work because we care. And so I think that assumption is incorrect. And we just need spaces to come together.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone here has experienced some kind of bias and stereotype, when you're of South Asian descent. And personal one was, everyone would always ask me, are you Hindu? No. Are you Muslim? No. Okay, then what are you? And, and it's like, well, I'm Sikh. And they're like, I don't know what that is. I'm like, that's okay. Like, well, let me tell you about it. So, in the museum space, like that's why I said Pam is very much pushing for working with contemporary artists, because a lot of them focus on identity, especially ones that are local in like the Los Angeles area. A lot of them come from immigrant families. And so they're trying to, like, one of the words we like to use is decolonize how South Asians are seen. And that's a very big focus for us. And that's how we can push back. It's telling the stories from the point of view of the South Asian perspective and giving that authenticity and giving that representation.
Yeah, I think, I belong to the diaspora. I grew up in India and I came here later as a graduate student. So one thing that I've noticed is, given the area that I work in, the geographic region, right, the concentration is huge. But because it's so tech focused, though, I think a lot of people practice culture specific things in silos. They don't tend to move out of them often, because I think the number of people is so high that they are happy being in many of those spaces. So I often wonder about how that is being seen or not seen by mainstream society around us. So that doesn't speak to stereotyping though, but then the stereotyping becomes that because people don't know of, for example, the Ali Akbar Khan College of Music that we have in San Rafael, which is north of San Francisco, not many people know about it. So unless you're an enthusiast, and you don't have to be a South Asian to be an enthusiast of that kind of music, but that's why Bollywood is understood as South Asian music. So that kind of stereotype I have seen around me. But I have also seen that, when I go to a lot of conferences, like library-specific conferences, I'm probably the only person who is doing South Asia-related work. So I get good questions and I respond to the questions, but, the kind of conversation we're having here, those don't happen at those conferences, and that's one of the reasons you go to conferences, right? You make those connections, have those rich exchanges, but I think we're having it here.
And yeah, I definitely agree. I think stereotypes for South Asians are really, I've been seeing a lot more recently, I think just through social media and what people are pushing on social media. So I think mentioning that, engaging with others and kind of pushing back on them is really, really important. So thank you guys for your guys' responses to that. The next one I have is, if someone's interested in the field, but they're not sure, like, where do I begin? What kind of advice would you guys give, maybe off of like personal experience?
Yeah, I'm hugely biased here, but come volunteer with SAADA. I think, as I mentioned, we love, really the ways that community is part of the effort of the organization. So, every summer we have a summer volunteer cohort where we collect stories and transcribe stories for the First Days Project, which I talked about in my presentation, which highlights immigrants and refugees' first experiences in the country. And we have a cohort starting pretty soon. So if anyone's interested who's watching today, would love to have you sign up on our website, saada.org/volunteer.
My response is similar. It's, look for opportunities like internships, volunteer. I mean, ideally an internship, where you get a little more in-depth experience, just to see if you like it. And, it's okay if you don't. And, you just keep trying until you find something that you like. And, I'm in this point where my career trajectory has changed so much. I've focused so heavily on collections management. Now I'm immersed in exhibitions, and which I never wanted to do. And then now I find that I love it. So you never know until you try it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like volunteering is one of the best ways to get some hands-on experience. And of course, if an internship opportunity opens up, because I think that's how I too got started. Because when I was in the iSchool, there was a South Asian Studies librarian at UW, University of Washington. So I just went up to her and I said that, do you have any projects that I could work on? And she said, I've been thinking of developing LibGuides or research guides for South Asian music. Would you like to work on them? And it was not even a paid position. And I said, yeah, sure. Why not? So I just got into it. So A, I learned how to do LibGuides because I had never created a LibGuide before. That was my first experience. And B, I started looking at how to curate information and music and, those kinds of things in a LibGuide for a primarily academic audience, but who may not be South Asian at all. So how would a non-South Asian audience or patron base look at this music? So that started working in my mind as I started curating for the LibGuide. So, I got that practical experience because I just went and asked someone and she said, yes, sure, it's voluntary work. So, yeah.
I really like that mantra because I feel like personally, I'm a very reserved individual at times. So I feel like having that, okay, I want to ask to do something or get involved. So I think it really is important though to take the initiative because it's all in your hands, whatever you plan on doing. So I really liked that. Okay, the last question, a little bit of a fun one, I guess you can say. So outside of professional work, what's something that you like to do or get involved in that keeps you connected to your culture, your identity, anything like that?
Yeah, I love music and I play guitar. And when I was in high school and college, I played in a punk band. And so I think it connects to my inner identity as a punk rocker, I guess.
Food. I mean, you just can't go wrong with the food. I'm very, very lucky. My mom is an incredible cook. So learning from her and, it's always fun. Mom, how much spice do you add for this? I'm like, I don't know, eyeball it. And so, it's almost like a fun experience. And, I absolutely love music and dance. Dance is another thing I'm going to add, while you're figuring out your career journey here is take care of your mental health, find those stress outlets, go dance, go listen to music, and, make sure you're having fun while you do all of this.
Yeah, I love music too. And especially classical music. So I get a lot of Indian classical music and Western classical music being practiced in the Bay Area. So I try to, keep in touch with as much of it, as I can. And there are lots of online platforms as well. But I always also think, while I'm enjoying the music, I'm how many people know this outside this space? So that question always keeps coming up to me. But yeah, music is something I do.
I can agree with you guys on the music. I love both Punjabi music and Bollywood music. It really, I think that helps you stay connected because I had this little phase I think everyone goes through. You're in middle school, you're starting to listen to Justin Bieber, One Direction, all these American music. So I think when I was a sophomore, we went back to India, Punjab after a while. So I think also going back home helps me stay connected personally, and just here, listening to the music and watching the Bollywood movies, everything like that. I think that's something that really keeps me connected. But yeah, that was the last question I had for all of you guys. I loved your guys' responses. I loved meeting all of you. And I think all the work that you are doing is really important. And I'm really proud of the representation that you guys are giving us. So thank you so much.
Thanks. It was great talking to everyone.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. And I hope we continue to stay connected.
Hi, everyone. It's Anthony. Apologies, but I am in commute right now. I just want to ask everyone to, again, thank our panelists for taking the time and sharing their experiences with us. One of the things that we pride ourselves in is recording and sharing all of this on YouTube. We will also fully transcribe these stories and words of wisdom shared here today. And, again, our greatest focus is to provide a space in which we can surface voices like was done today. And I want to thank everyone who took the time to join us as well. Special thanks to our entire iSchool team, including our two students, Claire and Heather. So thank you for your tech support. Thank you to our student assistants that manage our culture and community series, and that is Tuku Friedland, who is graduating on us. So congratulations, Tuku, and also Nicole Azoff. Also special thanks to our events coordinator, Vivian Zuo, our tech team in Bethany Winslow and Alfredo Alcantar, and our director of marketing and communications, Nicole Purvian. Because I'm driving, I can't share the links with you, but please visit our website to see the past 3 years worth of AANHPI celebration, as well as we support 11 different National Heritage Months. And I believe our next event will be Pride Month, followed by Juneteenth Day. So again, thank you so much for joining us. Also, please join and subscribe to our EDI channel, Culture and Community, by the SJSU iSchool on YouTube to see all the wonderful programming that we offer. So with that being said, again, thank you so much for joining us, and have a wonderful day.